Yeah, I mean, a lot of the problems that plague us are, there's two sources of them. The first source is us as humans. The second source is in all the structures and paraphernalia that we've built, right? So us as humans, we have a bunch of things that we're good at: categorizing things, keeping ourselves alive, striving for a particular goal. There's a number of these sorts of things that we naturally are good at. And then we've built and constructed society around ourselves. So the way...
and that will reflect what's going on inside the person.
Yes. It reflects what's going on inside of the person. It also... So there are computer games and also social media is designed around dopamine reward systems, right? So in computer games, the primary driver and motivator to continue to strive towards something is based on a dopamine reward system. So as humans, if we see something, we strive for it. Once we get it, so when we first see it, we get a shot. When we get it, we get a shot. And then we look for the next one so we can get another shot, right? So that's one of the things that sort of motivates us to go. These are things that we have that cause us to go, you know what, that couch existence, I see an apple tart over there and it's looking really good. I should get up off the couch and go and get that apple tart, right? There's something that motivates us to go and do that, right? Gets us out of that, what would be paradise for our, essentially, maintaining our brain with minimal power, right? So we need that, right? So we have that. We have these motivators that get us to go on and do these things. So we have all these types of patterns that aid us generally, categorizing things so we know when something is unsafe. When the leaves rustle in a certain way, there's probably a tiger behind it. So
or a snake.
Or a snake.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we have those things, but then we build up the societal structures around it, right? And societal structures have a very strong impact as well on how things function. There are certain things that are human nature, and there are certain things that are as a result of societal structures. As an example of something and how dramatic an effect it can have is one of the problems that England was having was, they'd had a civil war and all these sorts of things. So the Americas had been plundered by the rest of Europe, and England was well and truly behind. So were they able to get back into the game? Well, there's a couple of societal shifts that they did. First of all, obviously, having a civil war doesn't help. But once you get past that, there's a couple things they did.
When was this?
This is back in the 17th century.
Okay.
So one of the things they did is they created the corporation. So the corporation, as we have it today here in the U.S. and many places in the world, is based on the corporation model that was created in England in order to open up the Americas to exploration. And it's the limited liability corporation, right? So the idea was that you put forward some money into some endeavor, and that was the extent of the amount of money that you could lose. So if it went wrong, then it went wrong and you just lost whatever that was. Prior to that, what was happening was people would sponsor an expedition to try and find El Dorado, which was part of the big thing, right? Who can find El Dorado? Sponsor an expedition to the New World, and then they'd come back and the cost would be astronomical and they'd have to pay, right? Because they were the sponsor, and it turned out that we needed all this extra stuff, so you have to pay up. And so there was no limit on liability. Well, that meant that nobody wanted to fund these expeditions, and so that meant that England was well and truly behind in the race. But when they created the limited liability company, essentially what it meant was, here's an amount of money. Now you're going to go off and explore, and you have up to this amount to spend. And if you go beyond that, that's on you, because there's nothing further that you can get back. Well, suddenly everybody was investing in creating these new limited liability companies, and that's the foundation of most of the corporations we have today. So that's one thing that happened that shifted the way England played. Another one was patents, right? So patents were also created in England. And part of the reason that patents were successful was before that, people didn't want to reveal how they were doing things. So if you were an excellent ship maker and you'd figured out a certain way of making a ship that made it better, you didn't want to tell anyone about it. You'd hide that secret, and you'd try and work it for as long as possible until somebody stole that secret from you, and then game was up. Well, what a patent did is it was like, okay, here's the deal. You tell everyone how you make your ship faster. And in exchange, the crown will only let you make it that way for 20 years, which back then, 20 years, technological advancement was less than. It was a very short period of time, but it was sufficient that you could make good money. And in exchange, everybody else, all the other ship makers learned. And then they could take that and they could improve on it and create something new, and then they'd have their own patent for that. So that spurred this sudden technological golden age, because now people had incentive to go off and do that and so on. So we can build these societal structures that work, but sometimes we confuse societal structures for human nature, and we think that the way that we are doing things based on the structure that we built up around ourselves is the only way to do something, when in reality it's not. It's a structure that we have built.
As per the level of intelligence and resources and imagination available to the people who built those structures.